I'll do the computer. We're recording.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Joe. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a very quick introduction of our panelists, just some of what they had shared with us initially, but we are going to ask them all to give a little bit more detail with the first round of questions. So please do feel free, you all, to type questions in the chat or comments to keep it interactive. And we have questions to go off of, but if you all have questions, we can focus on those more too. And also let us know in the chat if you're having trouble hearing anybody or any issues like that. So our first panelist is Shannon McCabe. Shannon is the Executive Director of the Association of Consulting Foresters. Her leadership positions have included positions with Virginia Division of the Society of American Foresters and the Virginia Society of Association Executives. She is also a founding member of the Board of Directors for Four Paws Animal Rescue, where she also serves as adoption coordinator. Our next panelist is Stacy Holmes. Stacy earned her PhD in forest science from Michigan Technological University. She is currently program analyst forester with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Division of Forestry and Wildland Fire Management. And prior to this position, she served as forest inventory specialist for 10 years with the BIA branch of Forest Resources Planning. And then Stacy also served as Colorado-Wyoming State Society Chair for SAF and is now the immediate past chair. And then we have Sharon Kyle. Sharon is the owner of Natural Resource Solutions Group Incorporated, a family-owned private forest management company based in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And Sharon is retired from the U.S. Forest Service, where she spent 36 years of her career. She is also a fellow and a member of the Society of American Foresters, as well as of the Association of Consulting Foresters. So very excited to have this panel representing some different kind of stages of career and with some different work experiences. So we really want to start off the first question to just learn a little bit more about these folks. And so our first question, which I think maybe I'll start with Shannon, is can you tell us about your own education and career path and any other key biographical info that you'd like to share, and then what also attracted you to the forestry and natural resources professions? And so we'll do that with all panelists, but we'll start with Shannon.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the panel. So I received my bachelor's in forestry from Virginia Tech, and I stayed right on through when I finished that to get my master's, also in forestry, with a focus on human dimensions of natural resources. And at that time, my interest was really in forestry education, not formal education in the schools, but informal education through nature centers. And I really enjoyed the work that Project Learning Tree was doing and those other programs. And so that interest is what led me to take a position as programs coordinator for Virginia Forestry Association. And through that position, I was actually going to be working with Project Learning Tree, and that's what, kind of got me excited for that position. And within 6 months of being there, I was no longer working with Project Learning Tree because I had found my niche with some other programs like SFI and Tree Farm, and really enjoyed the way that education was weaved into those programs And then after a number of things transpired with various staff and things that happen in a small staff organization, I took over some other roles and eventually became VFA's deputy executive director and was responsible for conference planning and communications and government relations things that you do not learn in forestry school that really didn't have anything to do with forestry, except that I was doing them for foresters. And so around that same time, I shifted my professional development toward association management, became involved with VSAE, as you heard, the Society of Association Executives, and achieved my certified association executive credential. And so my passion really became serving those who work in the industry that I was so passionate about, which if I think back to that human dimensions and natural resources, it's exactly what it was. I just didn't know what association management was back then. And so I spent 6 years in total with VFA and then accepted my current position as ACF's executive director. And here I'm now responsible for a number of the things I've done in previous positions and overall administration of the association. And with my team of one other individual, we are small but mighty. We work to serve ACF's 750 members that are across the country. And so I think, a lot of us answer this question the same way, but what got me interested in forestry was I, grew up doing the outdoorsy things. I was hiking and hunting and fishing and all of those sort of recreation activities. And at some point somebody said to me, there's careers in this stuff. And I ended up in forestry, not really knowing what that was, except that I grew up in Maryland and I could go to Virginia Tech and pay in-state tuition for forestry because it wasn't taught at Maryland schools. And I quickly learned and quickly realized that these were my people. This was where I was meant to be. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Wonderful. Thanks, Shannon. Can we direct that same question then next to Stacy?
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank Joe and Jamie and Matt. It's a real honor to be asked to be on this panel. Starting out with, I guess at the beginning, I was actually born and raised in Michigan, in Petoskey, Michigan, and I'm a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. I didn't start out as a forestry major in school. Well, I actually, to take a step back, I actually did start out as a forestry major, but then I switched freshman year over to biology. So I was really interested in the time in botany and plant ecology. So I thought biological sciences was a better fit for me. And I also had the inclination that I wanted to go on to grad school. And at Michigan Tech University, the curriculum for biology was more heavy in the science and math. So I graduated with a bachelor's of science in biological sciences. And then I attended the University of Michigan, where I received a master's in resource ecology and management. And that's when I really started to focus on forest ecology and was really interested in that. I thought I was done with school when I finished my master's. I was ready to get a job and start working, start making money, to be honest. So, but I did want to explore some different career paths. So after I finished my master's, I interned with a nonprofit in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the National Wildlife Federation. And then I took a job with USDA APHIS working on Emerald ash borer project. That when I started that position, Emerald ash borer had just started to become an issue in Southeast Michigan, and that's the point where it first came into the United States as an invasive species. I worked as a biological technician, GS5, for a couple of years doing that. And during that time, I was working, we were a satellite lab for the APHIS lab in Otis, Massachusetts. And I was collecting a lot of data in the field. We were working on trapping techniques for emerald ash borer and testing different detection methods. And I was handing over all this data to PhD scientists that worked for the federal government. And that kind of opened my eyes that, you know, instead of handing over this data, I would like to be looking at the data and thinking about it. And that's when I decided, you know, maybe I should go back to school and get a PhD. Originally, I thought, you know, if you got a PhD, then you were on the path of academia and you're going to be a professor. But seeing federal scientists that were PhDs, I was like, okay, well, there's a lot of different things you can do if you do get a PhD. So that's when I decided to go back to Michigan Tech University to the forestry department, and I earned my PhD in forest science. After that, you know, I really enjoyed my time as a civil servant working for USDA, so I started to target federal jobs when I graduated. And that's when I got the position with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Lakewood, Colorado. I was really interested in working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs because it was an opportunity to work with tribes all across the country on forest management. And that was really interesting to me. And after being in academia in more of a research role, when I did work for the USDA, I thought it would be really good to, you know, just to see more applied forest management and learn about the different aspects of that. And with BIA, you know, I primarily worked in forest inventory, but I was exposed to timber sales and forest development, a lot of different aspects. So that was really a good move and really expanded my knowledge of the field of forestry. And then I was kind of like Shannon, first attracted to the idea of a field in natural resources. You know, just growing up, my family were outdoor enthusiasts, hunting, fishing, backpacking, hiking. I did attend an ecology seminar in 8th grade. It was like a week-long program. It was at the University of Michigan Biological Station on Sugar Island, which is near Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, if any of you are familiar with the Eastern Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And the activities we did during that seminar were great. We were out in the woods all day doing different activities. I can't remember everything we did, but it made a huge impression on me. And that's in high school, you know, I was total math and science kind of college prep courses to try to get myself, you know, to a place where I could, you know, go to college and study ecology.
Thanks, Stacy. And I gave a plug for environmental education there, so because that is how we connect folks, especially the folks who maybe don't grow up in a family where they're getting that outdoor exposure. So so we'll do this first question with our last panelist, Sharon. If you would kind of share a little bit about your path, Sharon, and some highlights. Sharon, I think you're still on mute.
Thanks. I didn't click it good enough. Thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah, I have a very similar background to some of these guys, the previous panelists too. And I, in 5th grade, gave a speech. I wanted to be a forester when I grew up, and I grew up in Iowa. So it was pretty interesting. But our family traveled a lot in the summer, did a lot of camping and hiking and whatnot. And I made that decision pretty young, and it was hard to believe I actually made it and graduated from Iowa State University in forestry. So I think my first job was in procurement forestry for a private company in Missouri, and not everybody knows that, but I needed to be in the field. So I loaded up my car and moved to Colorado and got another seasonal job. I worked seasonally with the Forest Service and the BLM all through college. And so I had some contacts and stuff and ended up getting another seasonal job on the Route National Forest in Colorado. And back then, in order to get a job in the Forest Service, they weren't hiring foresters. And we had an incredible forest supervisor and mentor, male, that really wanted to see young people get in. And I got in as an information receptionist. My husband got in as an information receptionist, and that's how we got in the back door. And it wasn't too many months later that we were able to apply for Forest Service jobs, so, or permanent forestry jobs. So that was kind of the start of our career. I was one half of a dual career couple, so my career was probably a little more diverse than some, because we both couldn't do the same thing or work for each other or be that close. And so we had a lot of variety of positions. And we both worked in forest management for quite some time. And then I ended up diversifying to recreation and wildlife, fish and wildlife, wilderness, all the myriad of things. I was real active in fire. That was one of my first jobs as a seasonal. So I did a lot of stuff with fire. I was a silviculturist. Then I got really involved in interpretation and environmental education, and we got the wilderness box out. I was a project learning trainer. I did a lot of historic restoration kinds of projects, and then I got into a lot of grant writing and grants and agreements, and ended up helping develop some of the policy for Good Neighbor Authority, and ended up as a capital city coordinator for Wyoming, coordinating and a liaison between all the federal agencies and the state and the two regions that were represented by the Forest Service. And I'm also now, when I retired, I decided to continue working because I enjoyed working with people so much, and became a tree farm inspector and work with local landowners in the Steamboat Springs area, where I started my career in the Forest Service, and really have enjoyed that, and getting the spouses more engaged in the tree farm program and the forest management side of things. So it's been a really long and fun career.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And definitely some themes emerging of kind of openness to trying different things. And I think Sharon's career is a great example, but certainly the other panelists too, that it wasn't just forestry. It wasn't just forestry all the time for Sharon, and how diverse, of course, natural resources and different components can be. So I'm going to hop over to a chat question before I even get back to our list. So Marcia said, she asked, what makes you feel welcome in professional societies? And I guess I'm curious if one of the panelists just wants to pop on that one, but if not, I will tap someone.
This is Stacy. I can talk about my experience with SAF. You know, it's the people and how you get introduced to it. I was a student member of SAF, but to be honest, I wasn't real active when I was in college. But when I first started my job at the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the first day I walked in, two of my coworkers, and one of them is on this call, Bill Yema and Ed Morgan, were very active in Mile High chapter. And right away, they're like, are you an SAF member? You know, just told me about what was going on locally, and got me involved. And to me, it's the people, and you know, being welcome and being friendly. And it was huge for me, you know, because I had just moved to Colorado. It was a great way to meet people.
Thanks, Stacy. And well, while our other panelists might be considering jumping in, I'll share one of our participants, Kendra, said, kind of echoed actually some of what Stacy said, and just shared that people who believe in her and provide opportunities is something that Kendra looks for.
Well, and I can echo that too. For me, where I've been most successful in organizations I've been a part of, I've had somebody like Stacy shared that sort of, you know, took me under their wing and shepherded me through those first couple of meetings where I may not have known anyone or wasn't familiar with the organization. And so it's what I always encourage individuals to do is, you know, seek out those folks that you can tell are at a meeting and you know, do your best to show that any organization isn't a you know, private club or a clique or any of that, which I've attended meetings those types of organizations too, and it hasn't quite worked out. But you know, no one wants to be at a meeting at a reception and you know, walk up to a group where the conversation is closed off. So keeping those opportunities as open and welcoming as possible is what has made me feel welcome, and I think will continue to serve the society well.
Yeah, I think in my case, it was my first ranger, well, my forestry professor, I was active in college too, so we were pretty active with that. And then I got to my first job, and my ranger invited me to attend a meeting, but he didn't just invite me to attend a meeting. He said, we need a Colorado-Wyoming newsletter editor. So that's how I got started in it and ended up on the Colorado-Wyoming Society and worked through several different positions there while I was in Region 2. But it was a point of not just asking someone to attend, but giving them something to do was really helpful to me. And then to get to meet all these people that were further along in their careers was dynamite. And they were so helpful and so positive and so encouraging. And you know, when you go to apply for jobs, it's always helpful it's helpful when you're interviewing that you know somebody that they know. And so it gives you a diversity of people that you get to meet that are in all different walks of life in their career. And I just thought it was really beneficial to be a part of Society of American Foresters. And I got involved at the national level and actually even got to attend a silvicultural tour in Australia and New Zealand. I did a lot of presentations at various conferences. I was real active in Forester Fund, trying to raise money. So that was a lot of fun. And so I just think that's a really important thing, not just to ask people, but to engage them.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sharon. So I'm bouncing around a little bit, panelists. So hopefully we're okay with a little spontaneity. But so I feel like we've been talking a lot about the positives, which is good, but I'm going to push us a little for some of the challenges. So one question we had, can you share any key singular moments in your career, either ones that have demonstrated problems associated with a lack of gender diversity or potentially benefits, and just talk a little bit about some of those roadblocks and you know, kind of build off of that as you would like. The curveball.
I'm happy to jump in on this one. I have a couple of examples of things that have happened to me throughout my career. The immediate one that I thought of when I read this question is not a singular moment, and it's not really a significant one, but it is one that happens just too often when the lack of diversity becomes apparent. For me, walking into a forestry meeting where oftentimes I bring my husband along and he's the one that is approached and talked to, sometimes first or sometimes at all. And the first time that it happened, I remember I was just so taken aback because my husband happens to be a forester as well, but this meeting had nothing to do with his career whatsoever. In fact, I was there and playing a pretty key role, but this individual walked up and just wanted nothing to do with me and just wanted to talk to him about his career. And I'm going, okay, well, this is something that I guess we're going to get used to. And it's become something that I'm able to laugh off, but something that I do it with, you know, a bit of a cringe, because we shouldn't have to assert ourselves to even get that handshake, or I guess we're not shaking hands anymore, but that initial conversation at a meeting. And then one other singular situation that I experienced was when I was pursuing my current position. I had a colleague who I sort of looked up to for advice at the time. And so when I was interviewing for this position, I was actually at the same time considering and interviewing for another position with another organization. And I am paraphrasing this from memory, but it's pretty close to what he said. He said, I'd probably have a better shot getting the job with the other organization because it was a group of women that I'd be interviewing with and working with. And I'd have a better shot there than walking in, and this part is a quote, as my 5'0" self to the group of men that I'd be interviewing with for this position. And the two things that I would like to point out are that not only did that interview obviously go okay, but I'm 5'2", not 5'0".
Wow, thanks Shannon, and thanks for being vulnerable and sharing some personal stories there. And we have definitely some good stuff in the chat along with this. And I know in I have a second grader, and when they're on Zoom, they do Me Too's. So I'm guessing some of the folks in the audience could do some Me Too's on on Shannon's story there. So Sharon and Stacy, anything you would like to add? No pressure, but if you do, I want to give the space.
When I went to college, it was one of those visiting tours you do when you're a junior or something. And the head of the forestry department at that time, who was not there when I got there, I went in to meet with him, and he said, wow, this is really a change. You know, we used to drown the females, you know, on the farm, you know, they would take the animals if there were too many females and throw them in the river. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I getting into? So I managed to, luckily he was not there, and the new director or whatever was awesome, and he was a huge mentor in my life. So there were some challenges with that, and I too agree. There were some Me Too's with both. It says my husband is also a forester, so there were a lot of those kind of situations. I think one time later on in my career, I always just worked with a lot of different people, and I never really had any problems at all. But one time they actually used me because I was probably 8 months pregnant at the time. And we had a very contentious meeting, and they said, well, let's have Sharon be in charge of it because, you know, people aren't going to yell at a pregnant woman. But it did really work out to our advantage because there were some very irate people coming in, and it was regarding the roadless rule. And they just looked speechless, and they're like, well, we can't really get mad at a pregnant woman. So they used me a few times during those meetings to alleviate some of the tension and whatnot. So more in fun, but it was a little bit helpful to take people aback because they weren't expecting to see a woman in those kind of positions. So anyway, so otherwise I feel very fortunate that I don't really feel like I ever had any kind of harassment kinds of issues or anything like that. And I feel very fortunate, I think, to have probably been in Region 2. And I was very open and honest with everybody and enjoyed working with everybody. And I was very open if I had one other staff person in a supervisor's office that liked to walk down the aisle with his arm around me. And I'm like, well, do you put your arm around the PAO when you walk down? It was a guy. And he goes, well, no. And I said, well, that would be great if you didn't have to do that with me. But I never really got too upset about those things. They were kind of fatherly figures and whatnot. So it was a different era back then. So
Thanks, Sharon. I think Stacy might be hopping in
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have like, a story to tell, but, just over the years of, my career as a forester, um, you know, continue to be in a lot of like national level meetings or higher level meetings. And one of my former coworkers is on this call, Karen DeBoard. Many times we found that there was only like one or two of us in the room, females. So it's apparent that we still lack diversity in our field.
Mhm.
Thanks, Stacy. Right. And for sure, we're focusing on gender a lot today, but there's all types of diversity. And yeah, in forestry and natural resources, we struggle with several of the areas, certainly. And I think that inclusion piece is a big part, some of what we're talking about, of how do you really not only get folks interested, but help them most feel engaged and included, because you have to do both parts or it's not gonna work. So we had another great question in the chat, and feel free to keep those coming. Maddie said, in some of these scenarios that we're talking about, and I think she was probably when Sharon was sharing that comment, is what do you think is the best way to respond to conversations like that? And I think it really depends probably on exactly what's said, but kind of how to address that in those moments, and how that might look different if it's when you're actually interviewing for a position or trying to promote or something like that. Anybody? Or that's the hard part, I guess, the pause for that one.
It certainly is, and like you said, Jamie, it's so situation dependent, and how that conversation is framed. The story that I shared about the interview situation, it came down to my confidence in my qualifications for a position, and just explaining that that's why I was going to walk in confidently to both of those interviews. Nothing to do with my gender or height, and it was somebody that I felt comfortable kind of calling out on that. But it's trickier when it's not a someone that you have that comfortable relationship with.
What I've really tried to work on over the years, and I haven't always been the best about it, but I'm getting better, is if I hear something that doesn't sound right, I speak up. There's been a big, I work for the Department of Interior, and there's been a big push, to combat, hostile work environment, workplace harassment. And, looking back, there's times where I wish I would have spoke up, and I probably didn't. And I've, in recent years, probably as, I'm older now, more confident, I say something if I don't think something's appropriate, and I encourage others to do that as well.
I think that's a really good point. And I think SAF really helped me a lot with that, because I was invited to participate at the very beginning of my career and worked with all these people who had been involved, were quite a far along in their career and were good mentors and good role models, and called me out on a few things too. If I was, they counseled me wisely, I guess I should say. But it gave me the confidence to speak out to anybody, whether they were older or wiser or younger or, far in their career or whatever, because I've worked with so many of, that kind of people, and it just gave me more confidence. So I think, especially early in your career, it's another opportunity for you to hold some leadership positions and to get involved in public speaking and that kind of thing. And I think that's really a valuable asset. And I think the mentorship that you gain with that group of people is really, really awesome.
Thanks, Sharon. And we have some more great stuff in the chat, and I'm probably not catching all of it, but definitely be checking out the chat on your own too. But I wanted to build off of, I mean, another great suggestion, Maddie, is to just ask a question. A lot of times if somebody says something that is like ridiculous, if you actually ask them, well, what do you mean by that? Or you know, that just puts them on their heels and kind of puts it right out there. So that's one of the easiest tricks in the book. But I also really appreciate that Marcia said this, and I was kind of thinking the same thing, how important, this is where it's really important for the allies too. You know, if somebody's saying something exclusive towards a man, it's most helpful if a woman speaks up. If it's a woman, it's most helpful if a man speaks up. If it's a person of color, it's most helpful if a white person speaks up. So, you know, look out for each other, and then people are more likely to speak up for you too. And then yeah, some more funny stuff in the chat. So and we have a super funny question, but I think I don't know if I'll go there right now, but we might have to add it. But I feel like we would have good social conversation here, Joe, at the end if we leave a little time for it potentially. But I know our time, we're going quick, so I probably have time for one more question, and we might not even get to everybody on it. So maybe I'll go with kind of, if folks have some inspiration, and I think I'll pitch it in kind of two different ways. So one, if you have any thoughts on just how we could be doing better, whether it's in an SAF context or even a professional context, at welcoming and including different folks, younger folks, women, others. And then perhaps mentorship may or may not connect to that, but I know for some that comes up a lot, that finding good mentor, and in our field finding a woman mentor can be challenging. But anybody want to hop in on that?
I know I went first last time, but I'll hop in again if my fellow panelists don't want to.
I know if we want to let Shannon not be the first hopper, since she's been doing it a lot. I know Sharon, I feel like Sharon told me she had some good stuff for professional support.
Yeah, I think, and again, I'll plug SAF because I met some other women that were actually in SAF. Not many, there were a few of us, but they were early in their career too. And it was good to have a group of women that you could just visit about the challenges and what you were going through and whatnot. But I don't want to negate the wonderful mentors I had that were men, and especially you know, further up the ladder and whatnot, because they were truly helpful in the career. And I know that a lot of those were members in SAF, and I got to meet a lot of them through that. And so I just don't want you to forget it. It's great to have women, and now there are women that are older and wiser that would love to be mentors and have been really wonderful as I advanced in my career. But I can't not say that you've got to have a guy too. It's really great to have some men there.
Thank you, Sharon. And something, thank you so much. Mary just put in the chat, I want everybody to know that there is a Women's Forest Congress being planned. So if folks aren't aware of that, the website is in there, and there's actually an event coming up in June. I can, Joe, we can make sure that's in our, I think Joe is going to send some kind of after email notes and resources, so we can include that.
I will, Jamie.
Okay.
And I'm going to copy that off from Mary right now.
Okay. So we still have a little time that a panelist could pop, but I also feel like there's some of our audience is sharing some cool stuff. So I don't know Joe, can we go a little free form and see if anybody out there wants to say something or ask something?
For sure. We have about 8 minutes to 6. So yeah, open up your mic and not everybody talk at once.
I have a question. So I guess I can turn on my camera too. I had a colleague who I was on an interview panel for when we were hiring for her position. She told me that as the only female on the hiring committee and in the interviews, that I was the most intimidating person on the interview committee. I don't know if anybody has any experience with something like that happening. I would hope that I don't come off intimidating. I guess it could be my height. I mean, I'm almost 6 feet tall, but so that's like on the opposite end of the spectrum of being short. But I always wonder, I guess, being on the opposite end of being intimidating from a female perspective.
Well, maybe to build off like a kind of somewhat like some similarities to example, Tara, I know I can share that. So I guess I have noticed in my career that sometimes women can be great advocates for each other and sometimes not so much. And I know that's been something that's come up a fair bit for me, where I don't know exactly what it is, and sometimes I think it's different things and personalities, but I think, you know, I think some of it is sometimes just competition, whether it's not even you know, and perceiving things within each other, but maybe sometimes I think sometimes women, you know, I'm speaking from my own lived experience, but that sometimes there's maybe a little bit different type of competition that can come up, you know, especially if, I don't know, we kind of stand out in the natural resources crowd, and I don't know, but I too have had some stories like that in my career too. Other comments on that one?
I only recently learned the term queen bee syndrome. I had experienced it, but didn't know to put a name with it. And it's sort of like Jamie was talking about, you know, there are so few women that there are women who are used to being the only or one of the only women. And I don't know, use that to their advantage or what have you, and sort of create that competition with other women. And so I wonder, Tara, you know, certainly not that it was something you were doing, but if this person had had an experience like that with another woman and felt that way going into it, that would, I don't know you. I mean, you don't seem to intimidate me. Maybe it's because we're sitting down and there's not the foot height difference, but I would think it would be a bad experience maybe previously, like in that queen bee scenario.
Thanks, Shannon. And some great comments and kind of support in the chat to check out, and mentions of just supporting, you know, all types of people, people of color, women, LGBTQ, how social media is a great way to kind of showcase those supports and resources, podcasts, which of course there is such a wealth of information out there. And then Tom put out there that he's curious on folks' perspectives on, you know, whether, well, there's an assumption that a lot of times a woman would prefer a woman mentor. And I mean, I think the thing is, we just need to ask each other more what we're looking for, because, you know, the assuming is, I think, yeah, sometimes that's where we go wrong. But I, you know I personally like to have a woman mentor, but I also realize sometimes that's just not an option or not the right match. Like, you know, you still want to be able to get career support and advice from that individual. And there's more messages coming in. And I know what, Joe, we're at about 2 minutes, right?
We are, but our SAF chapter chair said we could keep it open for another 15 because I think we right now have the fire going. So there's a lot of back and forth. So yeah, we'll go another 15 to 6:15.
Wonderful. Well, is there any anybody have another good question in the chat? So the one that was super funny that I'll just put, if somebody has a good story, they can share it. But somebody said, does anybody have, just for fun, a good mansplaining story? Which does make me laugh. But so no pressure. But if anyone has a great one while we're waiting for another question, you can share it. Just
I have
for
one.
fun. All right.
So it's not a big mansplain, but it was kind of a good contextual type, hey, this is what we could be doing. So I attended the Mass Timber Conference in Portland, Oregon, and I was having coffee with an older gentleman, and he was started to mansplain about how to recruit women. And I'm sitting here as a young mid-20s person going, yeah. And then I finally just said, you know what? We have women in the industry who we need to be putting in leadership positions. We have women in the industry who are amazing that we need to be featuring. And the eyes got big and he was like, oh, so I agree with what he was saying, but I also think that we should also be putting the women in the industry that are here in that highlight and in the leadership positions, along with recruiting them as well and showing off the women that we have to recruit them, to get people on board.
All right. Thanks for that comment. And I think one thing that's wonderful about this conversation that I love is people are asking stuff that's a little, like people are comfortable to kind of ask the awkward question or let's share the awkward story. And I think that's what's most important. I mean, because I think how we got to this place where we don't feel like everyone's included is partially because we don't talk about when there's an issue or when something feels uncomfortable, because we kind of have been trained in our world to not do that. And so I think that's something that's changing. And I think just the fact that we're an SAF gathering having this conversation and that we're chatting about some of these things freely, I think is a fabulous sign, and kudos to San Juan for the foresight to have what's hopefully the beginning of more conversations like this. So I know we have some folks out there who, well, I don't know if I can put Matt and Joe on the spot at all, but I know they were really interested in trying to engage, basically shared that there's some folks in the San Juan area that they want to try to help get more engaged with SAF. And, this is kind of a start of trying to figure out ways to do that. So I don't know if there's anybody out there from a chapter that feels like, that has questions about or could share what is it that might attract some of you to be more engaged with SAF. Like, is there a value added that you don't see or don't hear about, but that would maybe make you more interested in it and engaging? If I throw that out there.
Matt, go ahead, because mine's a one man shop. So,
Well, I mean, I feel that personally, organizations that are really not diverse, so by going the opposite direction, organizations that aren't diverse are missing such a huge dimension of what's possible. I always tell people in the Forest Service that we'd have less bad outcomes if many of our programs were a 50-50 mix of men and women. Just because we'd be hearing different perspectives, and we wouldn't be going headstrong down the wrong path in some cases, because some people would bring up some alternate opinions. And I think, to me, I think the organization is going to struggle to get folks who not only are younger, but, you know, really competent and leaders if we're not a diverse organization, because I think folks are aware, especially younger folks nowadays, that strong organizations are diverse ones, and it's definitely a weakness if we don't have that diversity. And so I see it as key to just sort of the next generation of SAF. If we're going to be relevant into the future, we need to make sure that this is representative of the rest of the society, and not just the last century of SAF. I don't know, I'd be curious of your thoughts, Joe.
Well, you know, I spent my time in most of my career in the Forest Service, and you know, I saw changes through there. I experienced, you know, going from male leaders to female leaders, and you bet, Matt, there was a huge differences between a forest supervisor that I had that I really respected, and then the replacement forest supervisor was a woman, and I really respected her too. But it was completely different styles of how that forest operated. But under both leadership styles, we were pretty effective. So you know, it's a vague example, but you know, I've seen that. I worked for the first woman who was chief of the Forest Service, and I will say, if you've been to the Yates building, the chief's office is on the 4th floor in the corner, and I was in her office one day, and one of her staff asked, why is your Dahl facing the couch? And she said, she's mad at me because I haven't taken her to the field lately. So, you know, she had, you know, like guys have little tanker toy trucks on their desk. She had Dahls, and this was Gail Kimball. She had Dahls in her office, and she would use them to make points. And one of them was that she was so busy being chief, she couldn't get out to the field. And I think that's where her heart was at, because she's a forester.
Thanks, Joe. I in the chat, Rita volunteered to hop in and share a perspective.
I just wanted to say that I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation. I work on the San Juan National Forest as a Pathways intern with Matt Tootin, and I was a SAF Forestry Diversity Scholar before the pandemic shut us all down and kept us in our place for a minute. I'm a candidate for a Master's of Environmental Science at NMHU while I'm working with the Forest Service up in Pagosa. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation. As a person who was part of the SAF scholarship a couple years ago when we were still meeting in person, it was a time when we were talking about LGBTQ as well. And so I'm really glad that we're having this conversation about men, women, all of that in the Forest Service, because this is my second career, and it's a really important conversation that I feel like we got to talk about how men are treated and mansplaining and all of that, and like what we're coming from 100 years ago, but also like as women, how we're treated right now. But there's this whole new conversation that I'm also like trying to wrap my head around, and we were trying to wrap our heads around a year ago at the conference that I feel like needs to be part of the conversation, which is incomplete inclusion. So that's all.
No, I agree with that, Rita. And I think, yeah, we still have a long ways to go. I think at this point, we're more comfortable talking about men and women, but we're maybe less comfortable talking about the non-binary and other points on the continuum and spectrum of LGBTQ T. And then of course there's other things that we don't tend to talk about, religion and where folks are from, and just yeah, it's complex, but so conversations are a good place. But thanks, Rita, for pushing into another area that we need to keep talking about more.
If we're going to talk about inclusion, let's just, cast the big umbrella to start with.
Thanks, Rita. And I remember you, Rita. I don't remember what year that was, but I recognize
I was in Kentucky, Louisville.
Okay, yeah, Louisville.
We had Cobb salads together.
All right, look at that. A food memory. I like it.
Well, we're getting close to where we need to wrap up. Does anybody want to make any last statements, like Jamie, yourself, or any of our panel members?
It's so hard to, the last statement. Well, panel, do any panelists have a quick parting inspiration?
Not really an inspiration, but I mean, I agree with what Rita just said. We need to continue these types of conversations and continue to push it forward if we want to grow as a society.
Yeah, I really appreciate having the opportunity to do a Zoom call, because we can get more people involved and have that conversation, and to go to a meeting, sometimes we don't have the funding or the time. And I just think this is an excellent opportunity to continue having these kind of conversations, and to involve anyone's welcome. And I think you had a great turnout, and I really admire you guys for taking this on. It was great.
I'll just echo Stacy and Sharon. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this over here on the East Coast. The Zoom meeting certainly makes it a whole lot easier to participate in things like this. And as far as inspirational, I guess, what I would say is, I feel like we're really at a couple of critical points here for the forest sector, both in terms of we're seeing these conversations happen more. I'm looking at a Zoom screen of, let's see, right now with the videos I have on, there are more women than men, and that makes my heart happy. But also, we are at this critical point where it seems like lately forestry is being looked at as a solution rather than a problem. And I think we really have an opportunity to position ourselves well and be a part of that solution conversation to attract young people, a diverse group of people. I just think we're at a really good and critical point right now. So I hope we embrace it.
Thanks so much, Shannon. And I think that's an awesome way to wrap up. And it makes me think of one quick statement I'll say, quoting Terry Baker, I think right after he got the position, and he said, "Do something." And for me, that's my love of SAF, is sometimes my job says no, but SAF usually says yes. So it gives me a way to do some of the things I like to do. So I encourage those of you who are trying to figure out, next steps in your career, or how to engage SAF and these types of organizations can be what you want it to be if you're willing to kind of step up and do something. So Joe is going to we'll send some resources to help folks figure out some do something next steps, but huge thanks to our panel and San Juan for organizing, and awesome conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to let Mac do the closing, but I just want to say a couple of things. Okay, I think we have people from Virginia, so they might be the furthest away, and that's Tom Davidson and Shannon McCabe. But I don't want to overlook folks. So, and I know we have a cross-country traveler, which is Kendra, that came from Washington to North Carolina. So that may qualify. And then of course we have my friends in New Mexico are there, and in Durango, Colorado, we're really, our TV comes from New Mexico, so we're really part of New Mexico. We just call ourselves New Mexico North, and then it's great to see ACF folks on here. And then lastly, I want to mention that Tom Davidson, who is Tom's a phenomenal speaker, and if you've never seen him speak at either an ACF conference or an SAF conference, you need to put that on your docket, and if he's on the docket, you need to go there. Tom has donated to us a bunch of podcasts of interviews with key people across the forestry spectrum. And thank you, Tom, for doing that. And we really appreciate that. So that will come out to this mailing list after the meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I just want to thank everybody for participating in this conversation. Probably the most engaged dialogue in a chat box I've been part of. It's very refreshing. And it makes me feel good. We've had a good turnout. You know, we're not going to make any progress on these issues if we don't try. And we're not really trying if we're not having conversation. So thank you so much for taking part. Joe will send out some follow-up materials, and really appreciate it to all our panel members. Thank you so much.
Yep. And by the way, we hit 40 for, that was the full participant number. So excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Joe, are you going to email everybody after?
Yes.
Okay. You know, I might take that email and then add them to our mail out for the annual meeting. So we've got our annual meeting in May. It's open to anybody, free registration, and 7 CFE hours for 8 hours worth of meeting time. So if you need them, you can get them.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good meeting. Thanks. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Stacy, I'll catch you sometime.
Sounds good.
All right. See you. See you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Frida.
Shannon. Thank
Thanks
you,
so much for
Shannon.
the invite, Joe.
See you, Bubba.
Okay.
Night.
I'm gonna have a moon pie at an RC, Bill.
There you go. Yeah. Have one for me also. Yeah.
Okay, now
I
smoke.
need it. I'm about to starve. I'm running out of food here, man. So
I'm gonna smoke a Winston first to cut my
there you
appetite.
go. There you go. I need to go get me. About the last thing I got left is Bloody Mary mixer. So I had to have that. So yeah.
Ketchup?
No, it was the real stuff, but it's getting kind of old. Yeah.
Well, anyway, Jamie, thank
All
you.
right. Take care. See you, Jamie.
Yep. See you, Bill. Thanks, Joe. Hey, Joe, I can send you, if you can wait a tiny bit tonight, once I get my children down to bed, I will send you some resources that I know that would be cool to add in that email, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, I said probably won't get it done until tomorrow morning.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
Hey, Jamie, I just wanted to say it's nice to see you in person after the Cobb salads.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully we'll be like for real in person here eventually. But it's so, you know, what's really nice is if it weren't for COVID, San Juan might not be doing this on Zoom. They might be doing it in person, and then it would be a little more challenging for me to be there. So so the virtual has some benefits.
Super cool to see you, because I have good memories of that moment before, and I was like always counting backwards. I was like, that was, you know,
I don't think they can.
not long before we shut down. So
Yeah, well, that's a good yeah. I love it when someone connects it to food too, because it helps me remember things. That's great.
yeah. Well, I used to work for the Kitchen Sisters podcast in San Francisco, and it was always either about food or music, and we would do these like stories about that, because that's like psychologically the whole brain. So it was cute.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I need to think about that more, using that more. So, but yeah, hopefully we'll connect again at something soon.
Yeah, Bev was my SAF mentor but I was one of those scholars from diversity, whatever.
Yeah, no, I was glad you plugged that, because actually that's something I'm going to send to Joe, because that, I think it's open now for folks to apply for that this year too, hopefully
cool.
in person again. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to send you a thing for my boss then, and I'll send that to my students too, because I'm doing a bunch of graduate work right now and like teaching a bunch of students. So I want to get them to apply for it.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I should, I'll put my email in the chat quick, since Joe didn't shut us down yet, and then you'll have my email.
Do it, girl.
I know Joe's probably got to go, but we're still on for now.
Okay. Oh, you're at Colorado State.
Yep, for now. I sort of bebop. My emails change readily, so once we connect by email, I'll make sure you have my phone number too, because that doesn't change.
You're like, you bebop, I bebop too. So where do you actually live?
I'm in Fort Collins now. Just got back to Fort Collins. Yep. I was in Ohio for a while.
Yeah, okay. I'm composing an email to you right now. Just make sure it works.
Yeah, it should be good. We're networking, Joe.
Matt is my boss. Okay, so you're Dahl at coloradostate.edu.
Yep, colostate.edu.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh, I'm so glad I found you. So my boss is Matt too.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And Matt knows how to get a hold of me too. So if for some reason my email, if there's ever an email fail, Matt knows how to get me too.
Cool. Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad I found you tonight.
Yes, good to see you. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Jamie. Yeah, I'll wait for you, and then I'll just send it out in the morning.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll add some stuff up, and then I'm sure you'll have other things too, but I'd like, as they were talking, I was like, I'm starting a list here of good ideas. So
yeah.
So well, good work. Good work. Yeah. That was a success.
Well, you get the credit because you were a great MC. So
well, it went well. We had a good team. So and great participants. That's when they actually participants participated. That's what we want. So
yeah, I think we had more spontaneity than we would unless it was at a bar.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah, I know. Hey, we didn't know. We were sober, and
it was 5 o'clock somewhere here.
Yeah.
So maybe people, and there's my 5 o'clock right now. So.
Yeah. I'm about to go down to my screaming children who I guess you didn't hear. So that's good.
No, we didn't. No, Chris does a good job.
Yeah. They're screaming with fun. So.
Right.
Well, good to see you, Kent. And
there you go.
Oh, there we go. So I know we need to plan a trip down your way. I mean, it seems so far away, but it's a fun place to visit. I know that. So yeah.
It is. And when we had the SAF Colorado-Wyoming, you guys were in Ohio. You were Ohioans for the time.
Yeah. Well, we even thought he looked at a job there, but it's just so hard to gamble if we could both get a job certain places. So we played it safe, but yeah. So,
all right.
Well, thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Good to see everybody.
Good night.
Take care, Jamie.
Okay. I'm going to end.